everyone, welcome to our next video conversation series episode. We have a fantastic guest today who is such an expert in this space. And the topic for today is going to be specific to the space of really how do these cross-channel insights that we're all looking at and desperate to have more of all the time, how do cross-channel insights produce media that matters? And so with us today to talk about that fantastic topic is Parvati. She is the VP of Director of Analytics at Havas Media Group. Just a brilliant mind and frankly, a wonderful person. So thrilled to have her on with us today to talk about this. And I'll toss it over to her for more on her background.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm so excited to be here and to be having this conversation with you today. A little bit about myself, currently a VP Director at Havas, as you mentioned, really focused on the media analytics side of things, but I've had quite a bit of time spent at other agencies like Digitas, Media Hub, as well as Arnold here in the Havas Village on the creative side. So I've had the great opportunity and luck to kind of see all aspects of marketing analytics, from site analytics to content to creative. And what I really love doing is tying those elements together, especially as we're talking about cross-channel performance, to really understand consumer behavior and how can our media, by aligning to these consumer behaviors and mindsets, really drive the strongest results for us.
I love it. We don't often get to talk specifically around media, so this is going to be great conversation. Kind of expanding on that for a second, can you tell us more about what type of work your team focuses on?
Yeah, for sure. So at Havas, we're really focused on two main areas. As we're talking about kind of day-to-day media analytics, there's obviously more that we do from a data engineering, data science, kind of bigger business problem solving perspective. But from a day-to-day, we're really looking at two main things. One is understanding the efficacy of our media investments and driving optimization of that media investment based off of channel placement, creative level, kind of efficiency and effectiveness KPIs like your standard click-through rates, CPCs, engagement rates, etc. The second piece is really uncovering consumer insights. So we like to dig into at the audience level, at the creative level, as well as channel, site placement, platform. What is that best combination to drive the strongest results that most align with who we know our target audience to be and what they care about in a given moment. Because we've really seen that when we're able to hit the nail on the head on all three of those areas of our three C's of connection, context, and content, that's when we're also able to deliver on our strongest business results and kind of efficiency goals.
I love that. Yeah. And I think my next question has probably got two answers, one that's pretty textbook, and then one that's, I think, a lot more nuanced to what actually drives success. And so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how do you really measure the impact of meaningful media experiences?
Yeah. As you said, it's a loaded question. There's a lot that goes into it. I think from a day-to-day perspective, it's really looking at one, holistically, how's the campaign performing against our, what I would consider channel KPIs. So if we're running on Facebook with a click objective, are we driving that intended click-through rate? Are we above benchmark? Are CPCs as efficient as possible? But there's also then the component of kind of pulling it apart into its individual components to see how we can optimize within each and drive the strongest results. For us, meaningful media, like I mentioned earlier, consists of the three C's: context being the placement, connection being the audience that we're going after, and content, the creative that's in market. So as we're talking about impact of meaningful media, it's really understanding how individually these three C's are performing and where we can optimize, but then also looking at it kind of holistically to say, is the combination thereof right across the different channels that we're running in? That being said, that tends to often be very much more so at the channel level. At the end of the day, our media is trying to drive a business. It's not just about putting a message in front of the right person at the right time. So we really structure our measurement plans to start with the business goal, and along with that, a KPI, normally something in the sales space or revenue-based goals. And then we take it a click down to say, what are we trying to communicate from a marketing standpoint? And what are the objectives associated with that? So that's normally where we're looking at things like lift in brand health metrics, lift in kind of an overall content engagement score, those types of things. And then we click it down even further to say, how is our media supporting these different communication objectives that are laddering up to a larger business goal? And saying for the individual channel and platform, what are our success KPIs as well as our diagnostic metrics that help us understand how we need to optimize in flight, but also tell us at the end of the campaign what worked and what didn't. What the structure really allows us to do is not only understand channel level performance and efficacy, but also getting to a place of cross-channel efficacy, and really understanding if our overall media strategy with each of its individual touch points are delivering the results that we're hoping for.
I love that. I love that you're kind of, as you said, rooting in what's, defined as like meaningful first, and then building toward cross-channel efficacy based on that, on all those layers. And I love the 3 C's. That makes so much sense. And anytime we can simplify the complex into something that's, memorable and usable like that, that's really powerful. So, thinking about the breadth of a digital journey, how do you really strategize for where visitors are within their digital journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really coming down to knowing your audience, right? We talk about more and more this idea of audience first planning or audience led planning, because at the end of the day, consumers are expecting a personalized experience. They all know at this point that data is being collected on them and about them and their behaviors. And I think the expectation, the trade-off of providing that type of visibility into our behaviors is to then also receive relevant advertising. So what that means for us is really starting by knowing who our audience is, what are their media consumption behaviors, what are their mindsets at a given point in time, using the wealth of data that we have access to through our syndicated tools as well as first-party data to really know where they are in their journey. What are the signals that they're showing us off of their engagement behavior, their search behavior, the keywords that they're interacting with, to really understand where they currently are. From there, we're then able to assign certain messages, the right placements, kind of create that meaningful media experience, and validate from a measurement standpoint that we are seeing the type of expected engagement that we would want, that substantiates that we are in the right place at the right time. There's also a lot of test and learn that goes into this because our starting data can only be so accurate. And I apologize for the jingling. That is my dog. I kind of forgot.
We always welcome dogs on these conversations.
But yeah, so we kind of start there, and then we do a lot of test and learn to validate that what we think the journey is actually correct. That's where partners like WEVO are super helpful in making us helping us understand that the landing pages that we're driving to, the stimulus media that is driving to those landing pages is correct, that the payoff is there that's expected. And then we also use in-market signals like content engagement, site engagement to validate that people are kind of where we think they are. And it gives us even more data to action off of and refine our audience targets to get more specific about where we want to be. So it's a little bit of, again, starting with the audience and then just refining from there based off of the continuous signals we're receiving.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, everything is really rooted in that meaningful experience, and it's got to be relevant to the audience. And that's really your starting point. Knowing that your ultimate goal all the time is to really create that relevant experience. How do you know if you're connecting, the right ad to the right landing page and vice versa?
Yeah. Like we've been talking about, having the right flow is incredibly important to driving success. So an early indicator is when we're seeing our diagnostics fall short. If we're seeing high bounce rates, low time spent, low scroll depth, any kind of indicator that where we are driving our user to is not paying off on their expectations, is a first signal that either our media placement quality is not what it needs to be and we're not reaching the right audience that perhaps wants to engage with us in the way that we intend, or we're driving them to the wrong location, and therefore we're not paying off on their expectations, and therefore we're not seeing the results that we want to see. Part of what we also look at is, high site engagement, because if we have a well thought out journey, and we're meeting those expectations, hopefully folks are engaging correctly. And that's where user testing, again, where WEVO is super helpful as well, and helping us understand, are they getting to that landing zone, maybe coming off of a learn more CTA, and the top of the landing page has more of a sales message, even though the subsequent content is perhaps below the fold. And is that why we're losing people? Because they're simply not scrolling low enough to find the relevant content. Things like that are really indicative for us, where we might need to make adjustments. And then also just being able to kind of A/B test into different landing zone experiences, and then combine it with in-market results to know where maybe our click-through rates are high, but the landing page performance is low, where we might need to make adjustments.
Yeah, and I know you and I have talked at length about all the landing page insights really feeding back into the right ad content, and vice versa. We could geek out about that all day long on a whole conversation just around that. But I'm curious, and I'm sure other folks are too, knowing that you guys do this day in, day out, it's your bread and butter. What methods and tools are you really using today to gather insights and then inform that ad messaging and creative?
Yeah, we just like to take a layered approach. We always start kind of with in-market media measures, right? So ensuring that the message in market that's kind of being pushed out in a broad way is driving the click-through rates that we expect to see. It's driving the engagement that we expect to see on platform. And then we go from there and see, is that next step in the journey continuing to pay off as expected? So if the next step is to get them to site and to engage, it's then using platforms like Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics or whatever site measurement platform happens to be, to ensure that the bounce rates are low, that the time spent is high, that engagements are happening with the high value actions that we intend to see engagement with. All of this is evaluated obviously against benchmarks, because we need to know what good looks like and what it doesn't. And then from there, that tells us what is happening. It doesn't necessarily tell us why it's happening, or more importantly, why it's not happening, right? So a couple of ways that we continue going about testing into stronger performance. One is using creative testing, either in-market, pre-market, out-market, where we kind of run it in parallel to in-market results to understand, do we have the right creative message in market that is setting the expectations that the landing page is trying to pay off on? Are there maybe things that are just not resonating there that are hurting our click-throughs or our CPCs? But then also on the flip side, doing something similar on the landing page itself. So from an in-market perspective, really using tools, A/B testing tools that can help split our campaign traffic to multiple sources. We use Optimizely, we use Adobe Test and Target, things like that that can just help us very quickly get to a winning page based off of a singular KPI. And then obviously, we want qualitative insight into that as well, right? That's where we found great success with partners like usertesting.com, with partners like WEVO, where we can really get at how are users truly engaging once they're there? What are they liking? What are they maybe not liking as much? Where are we not paying off on the expectations? Or where is there opportunity for us to clarify the experience a bit more for our users to drive a stronger overall result? I will say we try to avoid using just one of these methodologies alone, because I think it can often set you in the wrong direction because you're missing context. We found that really the strongest way forward is to layer your insights and layer your data sources, so that you not only have, in some cases, the why, but also can kind of see the actual behaviors and not just the stated behaviors, right? Because it's very important to keep in mind the pros and cons of all of the different methodologies when trying to decide a way forward, especially if there's significant investment behind making any optimizations.
Yeah, I love that idea of the layers. I kind of picture a trifle, all the, and of course now I want dessert, but I kind of picture, you can see into all that goodness, and once you do, you're that much more invested in it. So just like a dessert that you really want to eat, you want to dig in and really break apart all those layers of data and insights, and each having kind of a different role in there.
Yeah. just to add to that really quickly, because I really love the Trifall analogy here. So kind of sticking with that for a moment, I do think there's also, when you kind of have that bite that's all of those layers together, that's where you get the biggest goodness. I think oftentimes we run disparate studies and disparate analyses, and we then only look at them in silos. I think it's incredibly important that we understand how to take the individual data points that we get from these different measurement avenues and kind of tie them together to say, okay, this is actually at the end of the day my biggest takeaway and the recommendation that can come out of it. Because otherwise you just have a lot of data points and really no clear way forward.
Yeah, nobody just wants to eat whipped cream, or
Yes.
maybe some people do, but you're right. I love that we didn't mean to, but brought that Trifall example all the way around to the full bite. That's great. So how do you, this is a complex thing. You're trying to really evaluate it thoughtfully all the time. How much do you think about the different channel experiences of a user when you're considering media optimization?
Yeah, a lot. And frankly, I don't think we do it enough for various reasons. I think often mostly efficiency. There is an approach of taking a lot of the same creative or content and putting it in multiple different places, right? Which is totally valid. You always want to get the most bang out of your buck, and creative development is not cheap. But we have to be realistic, especially on social platforms, that by platform, the mindset somebody is in, the expectations that they have of the content that they want to consume, and how they want to be spending their time is going to be wildly different. Focus group of one, what I want to see on Facebook and Instagram is very, very different than what I expect and welcome to see on something like LinkedIn, right? So as we're looking at individual platform performance, it's incredibly important for us to take into account of, did we really put the right message in place for the platform that we're running in? Very often we see certain platforms underperform compared to another, simply because we took the same message that would work really, really well in LinkedIn, but just doesn't resonate with the mindset a user is in when they're scrolling through Instagram looking for, maybe something more fun and aspirational. Or, on Facebook trying to see pictures about friends and family and then being, hit with maybe something that feels more work related. So it's important for us to keep that aspect in mind from a messaging standpoint, but we also think about it a lot in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. The way we're able to reach different audiences on these platforms, the amount that it costs to reach these audiences on different platforms, and even just the scale and availability of our audiences by platform, whether that's social or you start including video or content partner sites, varies very significantly. And if we don't take those variables into account, you're really comparing apples and oranges, thinking it's all the same. So we very much try and take into account that every channel, every site has a different experience and a different mindset that it's promoting. That's why they all exist and still have their own audiences. Otherwise it would be completely redundant, and try to make sure that that is being reflected in the optimizations that we're providing our clients.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it goes right back to the heart of what you've the thread through everything you've been talking about the whole time is the right message to the right person at the right place at the right time. And, so a follow-up to that, how much do you think about these different audiences or personas of users? Like how much are you differentiating and thinking about them as segments or specific people?
Also a lot. I really think it's what starts all of our work. We're very audience centric. I don't think you can create meaningful experiences without knowing what is meaningful to the people you're speaking to. And again, because of algorithms, because of the wealth of data that has to date been available, personalization is expected. So if we were to go into market treating every consumer the same, not having segmentation, not even getting to the place of micro segments, we would be hurting the brand because it creates frustration. It's truly the opposite of a meaningful experience at that point. So in order to really understand how to go to market in an effective way, we need to know who our audience is. And it's a big part that also comes back into our analyses. We spend a lot of time looking at individual channel performance by audience segment to say that, if we're going after 3 different types of women, really which micro segment engaged best with the content on a given platform against a specific creative. It helps us really understand how we can streamline the experience and really optimize what message is going into market at a given point in time. It also just helps us better understand, I think oftentimes we get into launching campaigns with clients kind of wanting every channel to accomplish every goal. So it also helps us better lay out of like, look, maybe segment A is in a different part of their journey right now. They're not ready to commit to you. I'm going to go back to the age-old analogy of dating that they use in media. But like maybe right now, like this is your first interaction. You need to get to know each other a little bit more. They don't trust you as a brand quite yet. They're not ready to commit. And there might be a different audience that's a little bit farther along in their journey. They're ready to be like monogamous and take this a step further, right? So it's really important for us to have those micro segments so that we can really understand where somebody is in their journey and then ensure that we're putting the right message in front of them for that stage.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Don't propose on the first date if yes. That's not the date you're on. Yeah. So, you described earlier that one of your best indicators of if something's working is often when you see signal that it's not. So I'm curious, what are some examples when you've noticed a disconnect in a campaign journey?
Yeah, I was recently analyzing a campaign that was messaged to mothers and young professional, highly driven mothers on top of that. So very, very busy group of individuals. And the goal was to get them to sign up for a webinar. The messaging that we put into place was running across multiple different platforms. Facebook was one of them. And it had kind of a CTA of go sign up or like come watch this webinar. We had a couple of different messages. And we saw that fall a little flat on Facebook. And as we dug into it a little bit more, we came to realize that it's just a mismatch of expectations and kind of mindset, right? A lot of times, again, perhaps focus group of one, but when I'm on Facebook, I'm there to see pictures of friends and family and kind of catch up on personal life. It's a time when I'm switching my brain off. It's not necessarily when I want to be thinking about work or how to better myself or any of that. So to be hit with a message of, hey, go sign up for a webinar. You have no flexibility on when you can kind of hear the content that's happening on a given day and time, didn't quite hit the nail on the head for the audience. So we made a small tweak where we started mentioning the availability of the content being on demand. And that, hey, you can come and tune in whenever like you're ready and you have time. And we actually saw our click-through rates increase 49%.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just a really great indicator of kind of taking what isn't working to identify what could work, testing that in market, and then actually like seeing that hypothesis proven true.
Yeah, and that it doesn't have to be a throw everything out and start over. It's a small tweak to reflecting their mindset of that moment, that place in their day, in their journey. That's great. I love that example. So kind of flipping that coin, what are inversely some examples when a campaign journey is like fluid and successful and you see that everything's going like it's supposed to? What are some signals there?
Yeah, I think we typically see that's when you're seeing strong above benchmark performance for every KPI along the way, right? I know earlier I talked about kind of the different levels at which we look at performance. And normally when we have a well-optimized journey, that's where you're seeing strong diagnostics, you're seeing strong channel KPI performance, you're meeting your communication objective KPIs, which are often more long-term longitudinal items that you're trying to move, like lift and awareness. Your ad recall sees an increase because now it's relevant and meaningful to the user, so they're actually remembering what they're seeing. Consideration improves. You're really moving the needle on these harder to move items, and you're impacting the business in a positive, incremental way that you would not be able to drive without media. Because again, you're adding value to the consumer's life by having an optimized experience versus detracting from it. And anytime you're doing that, you're creating a stronger relationship with the brand. And in a world where there's so much choice and so much advertising, the more positive sentiment that you can create the more positive kind of emotions you can create with your brand, the more likely you are to stand out and to drive that long-term engagement.
Love it. What are some brands and just orgs that you're seeing that you kind of are inspired by of how they're approaching a holistic media campaigner journey with that in mind?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the DTC brands that have popped up over the past 5-10 years, 2 to 5 years, do a really great, recent past, do a really great job with that. I think because they have to, right? They're brand new on market. They have to hit the ground running. They have to break through so much clutter. And again, so many brands that have such spending power that they simply cannot match, that you have to have an optimized experience and you need to know your customer. Personally, I've always loved Glossier's kind of approach. I think they hit the market in such an impactful way. They knew exactly who their audience is, what they care about, what they value, and then have created the kind of experience across social platforms, across their TV advertising, across out of home, how they started popping up brick and mortar in a way that really pays off on what the customer is looking for. I mean, in a world where brick and mortar is very rapidly dying, they've had lines around their stores for, hours and hours and hours, weeks upon week upon week. And I think it's just a really strong indicator of a brand that understood their audience first and then decided to go to market in a way that supports that. I also think that, there's also a lot of established brands that do a really, really good job of this. One of my favorites for a long time has been Progressive Insurance. I used to do social listening for them way back when, but I've been following this brand just in terms of being exposed to their advertising for a long time. And as I've grown kind of almost with them and the target audience that they're going after, every time I see their messaging, I'm like, they get it. Like, this is a brand I can relate to. It's a brand whose advertising I remember, that I can specifically recognize that it's for Progressive versus any other insurance company. And it kind of sticks with you. And I think they, again, take a very audience first approach of really knowing, as they've been trying to connect with millennials, younger millennials, connecting now with Gen Z, they really understand who it is they're trying to get in front of. And have gone to market in a way, especially from a creative perspective, that really resonates with that audience.
I love that. I love both those examples, but something you said really stuck, which was just that, brand positivity and connection will outperform market spend 9 times out of 10. So I that totally tracks. I love those examples. So last question, we'll wrap it up here. What trends, if we're talking kind of future looking, what trends are you seeing coming for success in media campaigns?
Yeah, I really think there's a big movement away from talking about pure reach to talking really about quality reach. So again, as we think about our audiences, and just the amount of clutter that there is now, right? Advertising spend has increased exponentially over the years. And the number of channels that now allow for advertising has increased exponentially. So reach doesn't really matter anymore. You're going to reach your people anywhere you try to get to them. And there's so much inventory available. So how do we really get at quality and understanding the quality of our media placements in a normalized way? And how do we really make sure that these placements where we're reaching people, they're actually paying attention to it and it's not just being forgotten. So it'll be really interesting to see how the industry kind of pivots into more of that direction and starts measuring more in that space to drive results there. And what that means for our models when we talk about media mix models that very frequently are based on pure impression volume. What does that mean when we're now talking about quality impressions? How does that change where we're spending and how we're spending, as well as getting to more unified ideas of measurement? I think privacy regulations and cookie deprecation, something I know everybody's talking about every day these days, is also going to be a really interesting thing to keep an eye on. It sounds like we're going back to a place of more contextual based targeting. And when we talk about, landing page experiences, site experiences, that's where we're going to be collecting a lot of now first party data that we're ultimately going to have to rely on to be able to action off of. So I think kind of the combination of what is quality and how do we define that, as well as how do we start measuring engagement when there's going to be a loss of user-defined attributes in so many platforms, is going to be something we need to keep an eye on and see how that shifts our definitions of success and ways around measuring for it.
Yeah, the measuring sticks and strategies are changing pretty rapidly on two fronts. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but you're absolutely right. So that makes sense. Wonderful. With that thought in mind, I'm sure we'll circle back and talk more about measurement or something really smart and a new Trifall to dig into together. But now everybody's going to go find some dessert somewhere in their house when they watch this. But Parvati, always a pleasure. This was such a joy. You're a dream guest to chat through such smart content with. So really appreciate your thoughts here.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jenny. This was so great.
Yeah, so folks can find you on LinkedIn, obviously through Havas, and we'll promote and link all the great content that you talked about on this video. So we appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you.